After the Second Great War, the world was forever changed, now dominated by two different factions, divided on an economic system represented by red and blue. And speaking of in America, in 1948, Thomas Dewey very narrowly won the election in one of the closest elections in American history, on a strong pro civil rights, anti communist stance, becoming the 34th president in American history and the fifth from New York, with Howard Stanton becoming the 36th vice president and one of the youngest at 41. He oversaw desegregation of the military, which was already going into effect, the Marshall Plan, which was already going into effect, and keeping his campaign promise to keep the New Deal just as it is. But he also ended up failing to accomplish saving the nationalists in China, leading to communist domination of China. Meanwhile, in Italy, they voted to keep Umberto II as king. While in America, Dewey cracked down hard on commies, created a bunch of agencies, and funded greatly the Department of Un-American Activities. 1950, Dewey introduces the National Highway System to help unite America as well as bringing people from the big cities to the more rural areas, which inadvertently also caused America to be very carb-centric. And to keep conservatives and the Republican Party on board, he ignored the separation of church and state and changed the U.S. motto into In God We Trust, and make every kid take a Pledge of Allegiance that specifically stated God in it. And to make up for the mistake of China, he entered into the Korean War. It was going pretty bad, but with the support of Douglas MacArthur, they were able to swing around at Incheon and lead to Southern victory. Well, for a bit. It kind of went back and forth. 1951, Republicans passed the 22nd Amendment, making sure that there can never be a third-term president, FDR. Meanwhile, in Belgium, they were having a big discussion, should they keep the monarchy? Even with King Leopold III resigning for his son Baldwin I, a lot of people weren't excited, which led to the Belgian Civil War, with communist French Belgian Wallonians trying to secede. Under Lucie Desjardins, well, just in time, MacArthur already settled a white peace in Korea. So American troops were sent over to his rival Ike Eisenhower, the commander of NATO. Even the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg entered into the war on the Allies' side. During this time, also, the Belgian Congo declared independence, becoming the first African state to do so. The king really did not like this and wanted Belgium to keep the Congo, but Dewey refused to help in this colonial war. Then, ironically, after a British officer dies, he ended up joining the British in a colonial war in Malaysia. 1952, and the Belgian War was pretty quick. Luxembourg really wanted to take the German-speaking parts of Belgium, but they were denied. In an interview, when Dewey was asked why did the war go so quickly, and Dewey replied jokingly saying that Americans hated Brussels sprouts. But the mic cut off when he said sprouts, so it sounded like he said America hates Brussels.
Belgian Americans in LA's Little Antwerp, numbering in the double digits, are striking back against anti-Belgianism.
This accidentally upsetted many Catholic Americans in crucial states, while ironically at the same time a lot of voters in the South who previously voted for Strom Thurmond became very excited at this anti-Catholic attack, promoting Dewey as a savior from Catholic influence, which Dewey did not want to be associated with at all. Now, with the Belgium scandal, the stagnating economy, the slow racial integration, the China thing, Dewey was not really doing super hot, even after trying to shave and looking like Robert Downey Jr. Nobody really liked him anymore, and he lost the Republican nomination to General in World War II and Korean War hero Douglas MacArthur, selecting Richard Nixon, the senator from California, as his running mate. Ike Eisenhower saw this and said, "Hell no!" and he made it back to America. Since the last election, both parties were really trying to draft him to be their presidential pick, and the Democrats finally got him. While being a little more on the conservative side, he also really wanted to expand the social welfare and New Deal programs, and eventually he'll get famous for sending the military to forcibly desegregate in the South. He made a deal with Harry Truman to be his running mate to compete with MacArthur. He was able to even swing over a lot of people who voted for Dewey in '48, leading to a pretty seismic victory. Ike Eisenhower became the 35th president, And Harry Truman became the only person in history to become vice president, then president. He lost an election, and now he's vice president again, and he'll be acting president a few times throughout Ike's term. A lot of people attacked Ike at the time for being America's first atheist president because he was never baptized and was never really that religious of a person. Most historians argue against this, and Ike definitely wouldn't have seen himself like that. 1953, George VI passes away and gets succeeded by his brother Henry IX instead of his daughter Elizabeth. But she'll have the last laugh. 1954, Ike Eisenhower officially ends the House of Un-American Activities. Meanwhile, Marcus Garvey becomes the first Prime Minister of Sierra Leone the same year as Ghana achieved independence, and together they form the Economic Community of West Africa. 1955, the President of Argentina survives a attempted coup d'etat and continued to be president until his death in the 70s. 1956, Mobutu coups the government of the Congo and declares its new name of Zaire. It'll keep that name and he'll still be president till the late 90s. 1957, Brunei joins Northern Borneo and becomes the 10th kingdom in Malaysia. 1958, de Willers Graaf very narrowly won election in South Africa. So narrow, in fact, he only was able to pass very minor reform, including keeping them within the British realm till the late 70s. 1959, with the US economy booming from taxing the rich, and despite this popularity for Ike, Truman decided not to run for a non-consecutive second term, leading to the Democrats nominate the Secretary of Labor and former Senator from Texas, Lyndon Baines Johnson. And to balance the ticket, he chose his running mate, the young and handsome John F. Kennedy. So the election next year against MacArthur's former running mate Richard Nixon and the anti-civil rights Dixiecrats, LBJ easily won. In 1961, he inherited the failed invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs, so to make up for it, he ramped up the war in Vietnam. While at home, he made the Second New Deal, the Great Society, greatly benefiting humanity, big supporter of civil rights, and started the space program, and was able to get all of it through from light intimidation, and won a landslide re-election, forever changing American politics. But people still hated the Vietnam War. Gregory XVII is elected the first Armenian pope and the first non-Italian in several hundred years. 1966, in Australia, the opposition Labour Party leader Arthur Caldwell is assassinated, leading to Gough Whitlam taking control, but he very narrowly loses the election to the incumbent Liberal Party led by Harold Holt. In 1967, he had a very lovely holiday going swimming. In America, Eugene McCarthy ends up winning the Democratic nomination over JFK on a hard anti-war campaign. Channing E. Phillips becomes the first African-American running mate in American history. Nixon was trying yet again to get elected, and he really did not like the whole anti-war movement, but he also knew they were popular, so he campaigned with them, blaming the Democrats for the Vietnam War. And in 1968, third time was a charm because Richard Nixon is elected president, ending nearly 36 years of Democratic rule, with Dewey being a little break. Nixon was also able to defeat the Dixiecrats under George Wallace and Colonel Harlan Sanders, of all people. The two were able to bring the Dixiecrats from winning 0 states last election to winning all of the South except Virginia, being absolutely their best showing, and Republicans realized they had a problem, which led to negotiations and eventually the merger of the Republicans and the state-right Dixiecrat Party, which brought the states' rights platforms into the Republican fold. And the merger negotiations were dealt by California Governor Ronald Reagan, just in time to see the moon landing. And Nixon kept his promises and immediately pulled out of Vietnam kind of quickly and ended up losing the South pretty fast afterwards. Third time was also the charm for Gough Whitlam in Australia, being elected the next prime minister. Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev gets assassinated and replaced by Yuri Andropov. It's finally the 1970s. Stuff is very vibrant and colorful while also being horribly brown. Downright insane journalist Hunter S. Thompson gets elected mayor of Aspen. He resigned a day later, not trusting a system that would have elected him. Alexei Leonev becomes the first Soviet to walk the moon, along with Turkish Andriy Nikoliev being the first two non-Americans to moonwalk, which in 71 fired up Nixon to refund NASA, and after a few failed attempts, they made it back to the moon, as the British make it into space. Father of Julian McMahon, William McMahon beats Harold Holt in a confidence vote, becoming the next Prime Minister of Australia. 1972. It was discovered that Nixon was spying on his enemies, so Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew declined to run for re-election, but also denied any involvement and denied it existed and refused to give up evidence, even after a few court orders, and said the whole system was rigged and blah blah blah, leave me alone, the president can do what they want, even though the court said they couldn't. But thanks to a poor showing by the Democrats, Republicans ended up winning the election anyway, which was a double miracle because Republicans were fighting each other, with conservative Republicans and former Dixiecrats supporting Governor Ronald Reagan, but eventually the nomination went to the moderate faction, with Gerald Ford and Nelson Rockefeller. 1973, and to get the public's mind off of Watergate, and to get support from the former Reagan voters, America enters the Rhodesian Bush War, sending aid to the white Rhodesians against the native blacks who were getting funded by China. America was involved for 2 years, and this cost 332 American lives. Pope Paul VI is elected, narrowly beating the future John Paul I. 1974. In a very close election, the Greeks decided to keep their monarch, Constantine II, ended military rule, and elected a different person named Constantine as the prime minister, and reduced the monarch's powers. And speaking of monarchy, King Henry IX of the UK passes away, but there were some problems because his eldest son William passed away 2 years earlier from a hot balloon accident, and his other son Richard, even worse, married a commodore. So the throne passed to Henry's niece, Elizabeth II, who was married to a Greek nobleman. After 28 years as president of Argentina, Juan Perón finally passes away in office, and was succeeded by his third wife he married back in 52. Who was president during a time when Argentina launched a crew into medium Earth orbit, but during the re-entry, the ship disintegrated. But she had much worse problems to deal with because she was couped by the military. Meanwhile, in America, right before a meeting, Gerald Ford is shot by a former member of the Manson family, but he didn't become the first president to be assassinated since William McKinley because he ended up surviving but fell into a coma until 1979. So Nelson Rockefeller, the vice president, had to become the acting president, with the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development becoming the acting vice president, George W. Romney. Technically becoming the first Mormon vice president, but only acting. 1975, the dictator of Portugal attempts to escape to Brazil, but gets captured and executed. Acting President Nelson Rockefeller refuses to be sworn in as the actual president and also wants to retire and doesn't want to seek a second term. And South Africa officially breaks from the British monarchy. The Soviets land the first woman on the moon, Anastasia Belikova.
The photograph taken of her on the lunar surface, smiling in pure joy, Belikova has been likened to Rosie the Riveter, up until now a uniquely American image that symbolized female strength in the 1940s.
1976, the UK lands a Welshman on the moon. Instead of constantly relying on Australia, they converted their Air Force base on Ascension Island into their space base. When everyone was focused on the Angola War, Rhodesia's government was couped by the military and was renamed Zimbabwe. The Supreme Court upholds the ban on the death penalty. Due to what happened to Gerald Ford, many films that were supposed to release this year were delayed due to violence. Or films like Taxi Driver, which were limited to very limited runs, still became very popular this year. There's a lot of concern of George Romney trying to run for president because there's concern of him being Mormon and also being born in Mexico, which led to him having a third place victory in the Republican National Convention, first place going to Ronald Reagan, the governor of California and the former actor, who selected Bob Dole, a senator from Kansas, as his running mate. But the Democrats were energized by a former peanut farmer, political outsider, and young Georgia governor, Jimmy Carter. So it became a campaign of tradition and stability versus optimism and something different. And very narrowly, Jimmy Carter squeezed out. 1977, a new space craze was all the rage. Japan landed on the moon. Uniquely, it was not a manned mission, it was sent up via remote control. NASA launched the US Enterprise after a few delays, and released alongside it after 8 years. Star Trek was revived for a fourth season. The season received mixed to negative reviews, with fans not enjoying the new designs and the new psychedelic effects, but it didn't stop the studio from combining the first 4 episodes into Star Trek The Motion Picture. The Labour Party finally wins in Ireland under Michael O'Leary for only 1 term. Well, Spain elected their socialist candidate, and he'll serve for the next 20 years. Elvis Presley survives a major heart attack. Shortly after he was discharged from the hospital, he also fell into a diabetic coma. In 1978, Roman Polanski is caught trying to escape America, so he's sentenced to 50 years already, plus 15 for attempting to escape. Greece wins Eurovision with their song Charlie Chaplin, which was relevant at the time because people stole the body of Charlie Chaplin. 1979, Sid Vicious's prison sentence is reduced and he's sent to a mental facility. Many claim that he died there because we haven't seen him since 2008. China launches a mission around the moon. Gary Busey wins the Oscar for Best Actor for his role as Buddy Holly. The Sultan of Brunei becomes the next elected king of Malaysia. There's 10 of them and they rotate who's the king of all of them every 5 years. The 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant nearly goes into meltdown if it wasn't for the quick actions of the safety inspector, Homer J. Stankiewicz, who eventually would receive a Presidential Medal of Freedom, and a second one for eventually inspiring another character named Homer, who also was a nuclear safety inspector, who has a son named Bartholomew and a daughter named Margaret. Jimmy Carter went fishing and caught a rabbit. That was huge for publicity for his re-election. While Reagan was trying his second time for presidency, this time he selected the former child star and ambassador to Ghana, Shirley Temple Black, who became the first female running mate of a major party in American history. Jimmy was popular, but being an outsider, he didn't really have a lot of friends around Congress, and the economy was starting to stagnate, and eventually would go down because Iran started having a revolution. The 1980s. After the massive snafu of the early 70s, Jimmy Carter tried to bring the country back to normal, but in 79, Iran became a massive thorn in the US's side. Iran had a theocratic revolution, which led to a massive oil shortage and a hostage crisis, so Carter had a lot on his plate to deal with for his re-election from his left and even to his right and center. March 21st, and the show Dallas had one of the largest seasonal cliffhangers of all time. The large question of who shot JR. A week later, Carter was campaigning for re-election, but during it, someone trying to live up to the hype of the cliffhanger shot Jimmy Carter. Gunman was apprehended, and Carter only suffered a wound to his shoulder, while his vice president, Walter Mondale, was fatally hit in the head. This led to San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein being appointed the first female vice president in American history, due to her support of Carter in the earlier primary. April 26, Operation Eagle Claw rescued the hostages from Iran. The events of the helicopter sneaking into Iran to rescue hostages was turned into a video game, but it couldn't compete with Pac-Man. These 2 events boosted Carter's appeal, even with 2 lackluster performances in debates, which led to Jimmy Carter being re-elected. John B. Anderson won 3 states and was considered a massive spoiler for Reagan. But either way, the Republicans take over the Senate by 9, while 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat defect to John Anderson's new National Unity Party, who ultimately helped out the Carter administration get legislation passed. One that didn't happen was the Chrysler Corporation couldn't get an agreement to get bailed out by the government. December 9th, David Bowie was performing The Elephant Man when shots ran out and he was struck in the neck, tragically killing him. Another person who was in the audience, named John Lennon, was struck, but he survived. 1981, and the assassinations don't end because May 13th, Pope John Paul II was struck 4 times, killing him. But on a lighter note, July 9th, the arcade port of Popeye became one of the most recognizable arcade games of all time. An Equal Rights Amendment banning discrimination based on sex becomes the 27th Amendment. and it became illegal for someone to oust someone as being gay. August 3rd, and air traffic control went on strike, so Carter had to negotiate with them all the way into September. John Paul III was elected the new pope, a fiery anti-mafia Sicilian. Unlike the other two John Pauls, he was coronated with the papal tiara, being the currently last pope to do so, and currently the last Italian pope. Carter, with national unity support, ended up passing a 50-cent per gallon oil tax and 5% foreign oil tax, with a compromised 20% decrease in Social Security to pay for expansion in jobs in green energy and nuclear energy to combat the early 80s recession, and also selling arms to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to combat the Soviets without directly invading, kind of like the same they did in Grenada. People in Lebanon wish they had it that easy. And by the end of the year, NASA discovered pictures of ice possibly being on the moon in the southern pole, near Shackleton Crater. And Carter nominated Stephen Breyer to the Supreme Court. Former Vice President John F. Kennedy passes away at 66 from a long battle of Addison's disease. Wonder Woman the series is renewed for a 4th season. The season's notable for introducing Donna Troy, a girl that Wendy saved, and eventually grew up to be her sidekick. The season even adapted many comic villains like Giganta, Cheetah, and Angleman. But during production of Season 5, the network shifted focus and canceled the show. The script for the pilot was later reused for Supergirl in 1984. 1982, the Carter administration deregulates TV, which leads to all the big 80s nostalgia franchises we all know and love, and large-scale funding to substance abuse centers. Martin Luther King Jr. Day becomes a national holiday as the NFL goes on strike, which next year leads to the founding of the USFL, or United States Football League. In '86, the NFL loses a trust bust case leading to both leagues coexisting. The USFL's legal case was led by New Jersey Generals owner Donald Trump. Sally Ride becomes the first American woman to walk the moon, in a completely normal NASA mission, totally not to look for ice, and when it was discovered, NASA just announced it in '83. This caused the Soviets to withdraw from Afghanistan to use that money to go to the moon themselves, with Savannah Svikaya and East German Sigmund John. Carter promised a moon base by the end of the decade, and ironically, Ted Kennedy, the brother of John F. Kennedy and Carter's former rival in the '80 primary, jokingly referred to this as Star Wars politics. At the same time, the AIDS epidemic hit hard. The Carter administration funded treatment, and a lot of people, depending on which side you're on, either did too much or not enough to combat the issue. King Umberto II of Italy passes away. He never had any kids for, reasons. The throne would have passed to his closest relative, his nephew, but the Italian people voted to end the monarchy. The president of Nigeria is able to prevent a military coup. At the end of the year, John Lennon and Yoko Ono officially filed for divorce, while remaining close friends and work associates. The infamous 1984 was finally here, kicking off with some of the best comedies of all time.
The professionals. Ghost Stoppers! We're ready to believe you!
June 9th saw Eddie Murphy star as the young fool himself, Winston Zedmore, finding an ad and joining the Ghost Stoppers, learning to believe in ghosts as they uncover the plot to a seemingly immoral architect known as Ivo Shandor, played by Paul Rubin, using occult mysticism to keep him alive so he can unleash his god by incarnating the gatekeeper and keymaster to unleash Gozer. And Winston accidentally thinks the form of the Destructor, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. The same year, Ernie Hudson stars in Beverly Hills Cop. It was pretty popular, but saw more success the next year due to its soundtrack and VHS sales. And Chrysler tries shifting to the new market of electric cars to combat the highest balls of oil cost, which was the thing really hurting Jimmy's reputation, especially hurting Dianne Feinstein's attempt to run for president. And also a lot of people saying she's a lot more say than do, leading to her losing the primary to the young Gary Hart, a senator from Colorado.
The special interests are fighting Gary Hart because this is the prize. When they carve it up, when the PACs, the lobbyists, and the boys in the back room get what they want, what will be left for you? Who pays the bill for all of those political promises? You do. Gary Hart has had the courage to say no to the special interests. That's leadership. Gary Hart, a new leader for America.
Hart was 48 and very popular, even with conservatives. He gained the nickname the Atari Democrat and later the Nintendo Democrat due to his dedication to technology and a free market.
I think we can meet the basic human needs and commitments of the people of this country by restoring entrepreneurship.
While the Republicans selected political commentator Pat Buchanan, nicknamed the Arch Conservative. Hammering the Carter administration's liberalism and their weak foreign policies, like letting Nicaragua fall to communism, because the Carter administration did not want to fund the opposition who were dealing in cocaine. He selected former Secretary of Health under Ford, Caspar Weinberger, as his running mate. Conservative Republicans loved him, while moderates were scared about his nomination, and Hart was able to depict him as very dumb and too conservative for America. Though Pat did get the endorsement of Ronald Reagan, who after the '80 election and his term as governor ended, he decided to return to acting until his retirement in '89, where he played bit parts here and there. October 26 saw O.J. Simpson as the Terminator against Arnold Schwarzenegger as Kyle Reese, in one of the best genre-defining films of the century. The same month also saw Indira Gandhi survive an assassination attempt and remain Prime Minister of India till 1990, while British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher didn't have it as easy with the Brighton hotel bombing. This led to the ascension of Michael Heseltine to Prime Minister, and Gary Hart winning the election very narrowly, becoming the 40th president and the first one born in Kansas just in time for the 50th anniversary of Wizard of Oz. Activist Jesse Jackson became the 44th vice president and the first African-American vice president in American history. Anderson only got one faithless elector in West Virginia, so he retired, dividing the organization Fair Vote, while the NUP was basically done after the next Senate election, leaving them just a kind of interesting footnote in American history. November 20th saw the 50 billionth burger made by McDonald's, cooked by the then president of McDonald's and eaten by the original founder of the company. Same day, the SETI was set up to search for intelligent life.
So you think we'll be ready by November?
3, 2, 1. And the Jamestown base was sent to the moon, with a crew following next year in '85.
I've proposed a bill called the American Defense Education Act that would increase federal financial assistance to local school districts to increase teacher salaries and hire teachers. For this country to be number one in the 1980s and 90s, education must be the number one priority in this country.
As well as the founding of the Internet Engineering Task Force and the Chips and Science Act to fund science and microchip production domestically, and federally ban smoking on airplanes. After the Jamestown station totally wasn't accidentally sent up early, the crew made it, and were able to communicate with Mission Control via the AT&T picture phone. July 13th, the fundraiser known as Live Aid to fund AIDS research in Africa happened. After Kiss did a performance of Tears Are Falling, John Lennon did a cover of David Bowie's Heroes, as well as a cover of Paul McCartney's Let It Be, as Paul McCartney did a cover of John Lennon's song Imagine. In August, John Paul III declared a moral crusade against the Mafia, excommunicating anyone that was associated, which led to a lot of violence and downright 50s levels of communist paranoia about who could be a Mafia member. The Mondale Bill was passed that mandated background checks for any handgun purchases, and President Hart pushed for more nuclear power plants using thorium rather than uranium. The Soviets landed a moon base close to the American one, which happened to also be a mining outpost, discovering mass amounts of lithium. Within the next 3 years, this caused the Soviet economy to boom, as well as Gorbachev's mixed economy allowing for foreign investment. The Soviets ended up sailing from the electric car boom. Elvis woke up from his coma in '83, but didn't make a public appearance until now, recovering and going to rehab. An American adaptation of the Japanese Super Sentai series Battle Fever J airs. The show constantly struggled between being family-friendly and more mature, which led to a struggle to find an audience. It'll be another few years before Super Sentai becomes big in America. Lawrence Taylor becomes the first major defectee from the NFL to the USFL, and John Lennon marries Grace Jones. 1986, the Food Quality Protection Act passed. January 28th, the Challenger ship that was supposed to take the people off of Jamestown and switch them out for new people. Launch ended up being delayed because a NASA technician discovered the O-rings wouldn't withstand the cold temperature of the day. But in mid-February, a Soviet ship ended up exploding during its launch due to a similar problem the Challenger had, which led to the discovery of a man selling information to the Soviets from his ex-wife, and the founding of the Department of Homeland Security. The year also brought the banning of semi-automatic rifles, the AIDS Protection Act, and an expansion to the 25th Amendment to also end discrimination based on religion, disability, and race. Michael Jordan was drafted by the Trailblazers. Michael Heseltine called for snap elections, which he lost by 1 seat, to Labour Neil Kinnock. Him, Gary Hart, and Bob Hawke in Australia were seen as kind of three peas in a pod. While at home still being hurt by high gas prices, he tried investing more into biofuel, which has been a thing for a while, but this really helps with the environment, weaning America off of foreign oil, and also increasing American car production to make cars that run better on ethanol. This new blend is known as the Wallace Blend, named after former Vice President Henry A. Wallace. And due to this effort, this led to a massive population boom within the Midwest, the Great Plains, and especially Iowa. And Hart appointed the first 2 women to the Supreme Court, including the first Jewish person, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Minimum wage went up to $4 an hour. The ban on women combat pilots was lifted. Sting, the lead singer of the band The Police, who had his first major movie role in Dune in 1984, had a breakout hit as the main villain, the Goblin King, in Jim Henson's Labyrinth, which ended up skyrocketing his career. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant's meltdown is prevented thanks to earlier repairs on the safety shutdown. The Beatles reunited for a tour to launch their new album, Everest. The fans loved it, unknowingly riding the wave of 60s nostalgia. The album itself telling the story about the Beatles breaking up, but then they started thinking, was this the right decision to do? They want to bring the band back together, but they're also fearful what the world will think about them now. But critics were missed, seeing the Everest album as a kind of best-of album, trying to cash in on nostalgia with songs like Yesterday, Come Together, and the Live Aid performances of Let It Be and Imagine. But 3 of the original songs by George Harrison were massive successes. When We Were Fab, directly about George feeling sad that the Beatles broke up. Got My Mind Set on You became the biggest hit of the year. And This Is Love became a very common commercial song for how catchy it is. Way of the World by Ringo Starr also exist. California and Massachusetts became the first states in America to legalize gay marriage. 1987, and we send a rover to Mars. Godwin Abbey becomes the next president of Nigeria. Israel lands on the moon, thanks to information that they got from the spy Jonathan Pollard from the Americans years ago. Laptops start becoming more of a thing. Hart proposes universal health care thanks to help by Ted Kennedy, but it fails in the Senate. President Hart met with Gorbachev, signing a treaty similar to the Arctic Treaty that made the moon neutral territory, but also allowed for mining. And Hart returned to America to discover the press discovered his affair with White House aide Diana Rice. Hart apologized to his wife, family, and nation and promised not to run for re-election. Despite the polls showing a favorable outcome, and the average American really didn't care or just thought it was funny because he was doing so well as president, didn't care about his personal life, Republicans hammered him on this.
To strengthen the American family, to make American families a lot more like the Waltons and a lot less like the Simpsons.
The year also saw the launch of the Sea Dragon ship to fire reusable rockets in the ocean. 1988. Hart had a 3rd Supreme Court nominee, as the economy was doing superb, even in Russia. But biased news networks fudged the truth to get ratings. Vice President Jesse Jackson was the frontrunner, but a lot of news sources started criticizing him by being too liberal for America, comparing him to possibly losing as bad as George McGovern, which led to Jackson losing the primary to businessman Donald Trump. who selected Senator from Delaware Joe Biden as his running mate. Trump was an outsider businessman who just wanted to keep the economy good.
Because I'm running for the presidency. I'm here because I'm personally tired of seeing this great country of ours being ripped off.
But as far as Trump is concerned, our allies are only part of the problem. The real culprit is Iran.
Why couldn't we go in and take over some of their oil, which is along the sea?
How would you do that? Would you send in the Marines? Would you take a chance in a war?
Let them have Iran. You take their oil. That's what
How?
How?
I mean, do we want a war? What do you mean we
in,
take their oil?
You go in. You're
How
gonna have
do
a
we
war,
go
Barbara.
in?
You're going to have a war by being weak.
Okay, how do we go in? What do we do?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You're going to have a war, and it's going to start in the Middle East.
What if the Soviet Union said, you do this to Iran, we're going to come in?
I don't believe they'd do it. The next time Iran attacks this country, go in and grab one of their big oil installations, and I mean grab it and keep it, and get back your losses, because this country has lost plenty because of Iran.
The voters thought he was a little too different from Hart and Carter, and a lot of people thought he didn't really stand for much other than trying to get power, which a lot of people also didn't even take him serious when he announced it because it was right after the Mike Tyson match. So a lot of people thought he was just doing it for attention. Republicans thought the world was changing a little too quickly and thought, let's try to be more wholesome and family friendly by pulling literally the poster child for it.
That's your face, and watching you watch yourself as a little girl on...
Former child star ambassador to Ghana, Shirley Temple Black.
Is it like watching some other little girl? Or?
It's like a scrapbook coming to life. That's what it is.
Temple, who was Reagan's running mate, was seen as a gentle, soft-spoken reflection of a more humble past, while Trump was seen as the poster child to the yuppie movement, and Temple was seen as honestly more similar to Carter than him.
Were you really that cheerful, or were you just acting?
I'm a happy person. I'm optimistic, but I'm a realist.
She selected the former CIA director and representative from Texas, George H.W. Bush. Megachurch pastor Pat Robinson decided to run as independent, mostly because he didn't like the nomination of a woman, with Jack Reed, the Mississippi Board of Education head. So the election of '88, Temple won in an absolute landslide, being the first Republican since Gerald Ford to get elected. Temple became the 41st and first woman president. Pat Robertson had a respectable showing, but conceded the election. Unlike Trump, Jesse Jackson got a faithless elector in Hawaii and Georgia. And 30 years later, it was proven that the whole Hart scandal and the nomination of Donald Trump really was a McGovern situation because the Republicans manipulated the system to have the most easy win. Trump had to sell the New Jersey Generals to Jimmy the Greek even after his racial comments last year to pay for the campaign, and next year he'll also be the face of the anti-Central Park 5, which will eventually get him kicked out of the Democratic Party. This was the first time Republicans held control of the House since the 1950s, as the Soviets landed the first black man on the moon, who's from Cuba. At the same time, India landed on the moon. The four-person crew included a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, and a Buddhist. This was totally not done specifically for propaganda. That's just how united and peaceful India is. Totally. 1989, and the first thing the Temple government did was remove the gas tax. Might be a coincidence, but also had one of the largest oil spills off the coast of Alaska. Around this time, the slang term Wally starts getting used for the Wallace blend ethanol fuel. And Temple was considering ending the encouragement of the fuel, but realized that this is a way for America to compete against electric Japanese and Soviet cars. So ramped up tax benefits for car companies that switched to ethanol. This led to a huge population boom in the Midwest. And this kind of funny opposite effect of people moving away from big cities to go to the countryside and grow corn, with Iowa becoming the fastest growing state in the US and Des Moines the fastest growing city, right behind Omaha, Nebraska and Battle Creek, Michigan. Meanwhile in Europe, the Soviets loosened their grip on Eastern Europe, which led to Solidarity winning the Polish elections, which slowly crumbled the Eastern Bloc. Many in the international community did not want East and West Germany to unite, fearing competition, but they did anyway. as well as the establishment of the Republic of Prussia from the old Kaliningrad Oblast. But despite calling themselves Prussian and identifying such, they kind of had a massive identity crisis, which still continues today, due to the majority of Germans were exiled after World War II and Russians were forcibly moved in, and they kind of identify with the Baltic, and they're kind of just don't know what they are anymore. Meanwhile, in China, this led to massive revolt right next to the KFC, which led to the transition of the end of the People's Republic. June saw the rise of comic book movies with Michael Keaton's Batman and Robin Williams as the Joker. And Secretary of Education Dan Quayle made his first of many logical flubs. The Moscow Music Peace Festival and David Hasselhoff's concert in Berlin is seen as the triumphant end of the Cold War. The '89 game between the NFL's 49ers and USFL Michigan Panthers became the first major league crossover between the football leagues. An OVA of JoJo's Part 1 Phantom Blood is released. Series Baywatch is cancelled after one season, but becomes very popular in reruns due to the obvious. Helium-3 is found on the moon in large doses. The next day, Operation Just Cause launches in Panama to regime change as Romania collapses into civil war. 1990. Japan elects its first woman and first different political party since 1948, Takako Doi. The Godfather 3, The Last Crusade, is a film about the assassination of the first two John Pauls to try and get a mafia pope, which ended up backfiring on them. NASA successfully launches the nuclear energy for rocket vehicle application, and the Hubbard telescope, which ended up being a little blurry at first. Everyone had full moon fever as the Jamestown base expanded to 50 people. 1991, and China agrees to a new constitution and elects the Liberal Party's Bao Tong. O.J. Simpson declined to return for Terminator 2, which led to his role being recast to Sylvester Stallone.
He's fantastic. This is his best performance ever.
Temple appoints two nominees, but during the screening of Clarence Thomas, he had very inappropriate lewd contact, which led to him being replaced by the third woman on the Supreme Court.
Global warming has slowed due to the widespread shift from fossil fuels to nuclear fusion.
Atari buys out Steve Jobs' computer company Next. Short Circuit 3, Bride of Johnny is released. With a returning cast from 2, it mostly focuses on Johnny 5 feeling kinda lonely as the only sentient robot. But luckily another military robot is struck by lightning, and Johnny 5 finds kinship in Jonna, played by Kathleen O'Hara, and the two run away together, avoiding a military officer, played by Sting, and building a child out of spare parts named Just John, played by Paul Rubin, who also has a cameo in person at the end of the film. It did well at the box office, but a lot of critics and audiences compared it to the '81 film Heartbeeps, which was getting a revival at this time because for some reason it played on TNT all the time. Gene Roddenberry's ashes are shot to the moon, along with Isaac Asimov's next year. 1992, and Taiwan reunites with the mainland after 40 years and some change. Sam Kinison survives a car accident. Crystal Pepsi becomes the first soda and first commercial product to film in space. George Jr., the son of the vice president, becomes a commissioner for baseball as Japan launches their moon base. Mark Mori becomes the first Japanese person to moonwalk. While in Jamestown, Jeanette Davis and Mark Lee have the first wedding in space. Temple fended off a hard primary by the governor of Maine, Jack McKernan, and then very easily won the presidential election against the governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, who was an early popular choice, but he ran into a lot of problems. Vice President nominee Bill Clinton was arrested right before the election due to admitting to smoking weed. So with only a few months to spare, he selected the senator from Iowa, Tom Harkin, who was not as good of a replacement. Many also blame the independent Ross Perot in the founding of the Reform Party. And so NAFTA was founded, and to celebrate, 7-Up delivered a Shirley Temple-themed 7-Up based on the non-alcoholic cocktail. 93 was a crazy year. A disgruntled American worker made at Jamestown with a concealed gun. Unknowing to the Americans, he marched to a Soviet base and held it hostage until American miners saw him. One of the miners' suits were damaged and he died, while the other one was able to contact Earth, which led to a UN peacekeeper force having to be sent to the moon, armed with guns and scissors. They were able to sneak into the base with just the miner and one of the hostages killed when the man forced them into space without a suit. Many saw this response as very quick and efficient, while others were lamenting that this was an end to the neutrality of the moon. Nintendo partnered with Philips to produce the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Compact Disc Interactive, or the SNES CDI, which allowed you to play CD games on your Super Nintendo, which became infamous for being just awful.
Hey kid, you still playing that Super Nintendo? Look at what Sega Genesis has got. And Super Nintendo?
Link, go to Gamelon and find my father.
Great! I can't wait to bomb some Dodongos!
So what's the choice?
And discontinued in '96. Brian Mulroney in Canada won re-election with a minority government and, fearing a no-confidence vote, resigned, which led to Kim Campbell becoming the first woman prime minister in Canadian history. Brandon Lee became a huge star thanks to The Crow, and Hawaii became the third state to legalize gay marriage. 1994 saw the creation of the Space Force, pushing for a security force on the moon. The UK landed Elizabethville as the next moon colony, and India landed another base but away from everyone else's. Kurt Cobain went back into rehab. Michael Jordan makes it to the major leagues of baseball. Iowa becomes the fourth state to legalize gay marriage, as oil companies start getting that helium-3 off the moon in large amounts, which led to many in the gas, oil, and coal sectors losing their jobs. A common form of protest was taking a 7-Up Shirley Temple and dumping it in the electric car charging port. Democrat John Conyers Jr. becomes the first black Speaker of the House. He promotes the Contract for Progress, a list of demands from the Temple government. It's very popular at first, gaining 300 signatures, but its uncompromising nature led to a 32-day government shutdown, which ironically happened during the Christmas shopping season, so Temple was able to spin this around to make the Democrats look bad, because the Democrats are the ones shutting the government down and asking for very expensive things, when Temple just wants everyone to have a Merry Christmas. Alongside the Secretary of the Treasury, Ben Stein. So the tables flipped, they went to negotiation, and the Contract for Progress only slowly was integrated. The Sega 32X is cancelled before release, and all games intended for it is later ported to the Sega Saturn. 95, the Beatles released what they wouldn't have known would be their last album, Brainwashed. With many states legalizing gay marriage, Temple signs the Defense of Marriage Act, which federally didn't recognize same-sex marriage and allowed other states to not recognize other states' same-sex marriage for the time being. Temple also reformed immigration to deport a lot of illegals, which ended up deporting a lot of citizens. This led to a lot of rock bands coming together to release the Rock Against Temple album, to protest and raise funding for people in need. Japan was set to start the first biofarms on the moon, but was delayed due to occult activities. Peace negotiations led to the end of the Yugoslav and Romanian War, which was known as the Third Balkan War. In a peace deal, Yugoslavia was officially broken up, with the Democratic Republic of Serbia remaining in communist hands. While the Romanian Communist Party was able to remain in power, even managed to negotiate a merger with Soviet Moldova, mostly due to the success of Romania's new president, who was able to seize power from the geriatric old communist leader. And with Serbia becoming more in line with the Soviets, they finally reorganized the former Warsaw Pact into a new organization centered in Moscow known as the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO. The next Nigerian president is elected. Iran landed on the moon, but their ship fell into a crater and was destroyed, killing one and leaving 6 stranded. They landed near American territory, but Temple ordered them to be arrested, fearing that they were spies for Iran. But after close negotiation for 2.5 weeks, they were transferred to the Soviet base and brought home. Detective show Santa Monica Nights, or Nights, starring David Hasselhoff as Trevor Falcon, Gregor Lynn Allen Williams as Gregor Lynn Hutchinson, and Angie Harmon as Ryan McBride, premieres. It went on for 10 seasons, 204 episodes, and 2 seasons of a spin-off series, Honolulu Nights. Despite being one of the most ridiculous shows ever, the only thing people really know about it is that it has sexy women in micro miniskirts. The International Space Station launched to be humanity's last best hope for peace, and the pink M&M wins the contest to become a new main M&M. 96, Peter Steele becomes the new lead singer of the Misfits. Nirvana releases their next album, Foo Fighter. 5 out of 10 Americans now drive electric or hybrid cars. Due to the renewed success of the Beatles and the Beach Boys, Elvis decided to make his own new album, Blue Suede Century, which had the studio recording of The Lord's Prayer, while also having covers of Rock Lobster by the B-52s, and Hollywood Babylon, Mother, Where Eagles Dare, and Halloween by Danzig and the Misfits. Blue Suede Century had low to moderate success, but it started picking up more success later in the decade thanks to the Vegas sleaze aesthetic. But unfortunately, Elvis never got to see this success as he passed away at the end of the year in his sleep at 60. And George H.W. Bush loses the election to the former Secretary of State under Gary Hart, Al Gore becoming the 42nd president, first baby boomer, and the first president born in Washington, D.C. The governor of Indiana, Evan Bayh, becomes the 46th vice president. 97. The Ellen Show is renewed for a 6th and final season. Pope John Paul III retires. Robin Williams is the first pick for the movie Flubber, but he had a bit of a falling out with Disney, so eventually the role went to Christopher Lloyd. Gore gets back to the Hart Initiative of going into green energy, technology, and computers. Sonny Bono becomes the commander of Jamestown. The original one, John Glenn, remains the oldest man in space at 95. And partnering with Hilton leads to the moon bases, including hotels for the families of the workers. The sun finally sets on the British Empire as Hong Kong's return to China. The moon base is made into a general EU base. Well, at least they finally have another British Pope. Sonic 4 is released for the Sega Saturn, featuring the first appearance of Cream the Rabbit, though the next year saw the Dreamcast released with Sonic Adventure 1. But this is the year Atari releases the Atari Ocelot. It's not only a portable video game console.
This thing tried to be hip and cutting edge. It had a stylus pen, making it the first touchscreen game console, and PDA features like a phone book, a calendar, a calculator, and a built-in solitaire game. You could even connect a dial-up modem to it to access the internet, text only.
Thanks to the foresight of lead designer Steve Jobs, the Ocelot became one of the biggest pieces of tech in the world. Being able to hook up to the internet and text your friends, it remained popular and still on the market until 2005.
When you think about it, the most natural way to get your thoughts down is to jot or to sketch.
That natural.
Say you're on a train or a plane.
Or at a little cafe.
You can write a fax.
Say you want to send that fax to Margaret.
You just highlight Margaret's name in the text, tap fax.
Canadian Prime Minister Kim Campbell won re-election against the insurgents of the Reform Party and the rise of the Bloc Québécois. The Liberal Party under Paul Martin will eventually get their revenge. 1998, and the Soviets win the race to the cradle, with the Circassian Altair Kabar being the first human being born outside of Earth. Many American cities started suffering from major population drain. Cities like New York, Boston, Montgomery, Miami, Philadelphia, Dover, Cleveland, Columbus, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, Houston all saw people moving inland for the ethanol boom and outer space to the moon, leaving behind abandoned, rusted-out skyscrapers. Along with Operation Infinite Reach accidentally hitting a hospital, the U.S. wasn't looking too good, so Al Gore became the first president to visit Jamestown. In a legendary speech, the man who's often joked as being boring in the media said, "Pack your bags because in the millennium, we're getting our asses to Mars." 1998, and Brandon Lee beats out Sting and Will Smith to get the lead role of Neo in The Matrix. Gorbachev is hospitalized after an assassination attempt while visiting the Uzbekistan SSR, eventually resigning to Alexander Yakovlev in America after one of the most notorious incidents of public shooting. Gore, inspired by Australia, launches a major buyback program for guns to destroy them. Many rural people hated this and thought the government was coming for their guns, even though the government was paying you for your gun and wasn't trying to steal it. Dan Quayle returned to politics to try and campaign on this, becoming the frontrunner for the 2000s election, along with babyface Gary Barr, and the Reform Party was even looking strong without Perot, leading to a three-way election coming up. After Chris Farley's tragic death in '97, Sam Kinison became the new voice of Shrek. The studio had no faith in this, which is ironic because the film went on to become the highest grossing of the year and became one of the biggest parts of pop culture. Harvey Weinstein is found guilty of sexual assault. The trial in the 2000s led to the uncovering of one of the largest trafficking rings ever. A referendum to change Australia into a republic passes, which leads to John Howard, a monarchist, resigning as Prime Minister, while Malcolm Turnbull taking office as the first President of Australia, the first the next year. Benedict XVI becomes Pope. Hulk starring Jonathan Hainsley, Lynn Williams as the Abomination, Gregory Sporlander as the leader, and Sam Elliott as Thunderbolt Ross premieres, combining CGI and ridiculously large animatronics. The Church of Scientology starts getting interested in going to Mars themselves, along with India. Richard Branson invests in the European space program and wants to go to Mars as well as stating he wants a civilian hotel in space by 2004. Nigeria also wants to go to Mars, funded by the African Union and an investor called Elon Musk from South Africa. North Korea as well wants a manned mission, which they were going to do to Moon, but they're gonna send one to Mars, making sure to pack them a lot of potatoes. The North Korean mission launches way before everyone else is, and no one really cares because everyone's too focused on Y2K. Our lazy dumbasses only wrote the last 2 digits and didn't change it. It's gonna be 00. All the computers are gonna fail. The dictator of Paraguay launches martial law on New Year's.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy 2000!
Excitement of the 80s and 90s, it's finally the new millennium, year 2000, and computers didn't go crazy because it's 00. Australia officially becomes a republic. The dictator of Paraguay, who was scared of Y2K, who activated martial law, is overthrown. Half-Life 1 is ported to the Dreamcast, starting the huge partnership between Sega and Valve. Michael Jordan wins the PGA golf tournament against Hall Sutton. Atari CEO Steve Jobs officially merged with his old company Apple, and to celebrate, he showed off the first iPhone, completely revolutionizing phones forever. Jim Varney's lung cancer thankfully goes into remission, so he ends up spending the next 15 years spreading comedy and joy. The North Korean secret mission to Mars ends up crash landing on the planet, killing the pilot but leaving one alive, named Lee Jong-gil.
내래 위대한 조국의 명을 위해 임무 완수했으다.
After burying the pilot, Lee Jong realized that he is the loneliest man alive, quite literally being a planet away from everyone else. Landing in the Arcadia region, which is presumably one of the better regions of Mars, remaining alive setting up a potato farm with his own fertilizer. And speaking of, the American election is finally here. Al Gore wins re-election. This is the election that solidifies the 3 main parties' colors, with red for Democrats because of their vision towards Mars, and blue as the opposite for Republicans, and purple representing a mix of both for reform. By suppressing the far right of the party and keeping the orthodox Perot-ism of being pragmatically centrist, they're able to actually have the greatest performance of the party till this point and actually win electoral points. 2001, and, well, America became traumatized. The world was forever impacted from this. America invaded Afghanistan, and did Back to the Future predict the future? And Dale Earnhardt Sr. survives a car wreck. 2002, Walmart files for bankruptcy, which leads to Kmart becoming America's biggest general store. John Lennon performs Hey Jude at the Big Bull. Wendy's opens the first fast food franchise on the moon base of Jamestown. Sega launches an upgraded version of the SegaNet for the Dreamcast. which unknowingly will grow into a partnership with Valve, which will eventually revolutionize gaming with the Sega Steam Network. The Steam Network proved to be very successful, driving up Dreamcast sales, keeping it on the market until 2005. Skate Jam, a sequel to Space Jam starring Tony Hawk and the Looney Tunes skateboarding against evil aliens, is released. To mixed reviews, but Cartoon Network will be sure to play it a lot. Republicans propose No Child Left Behind, which gets blocked. After being delayed for a year, The Bourne Identity with Brandon Lee is released. President Gore encourages more states to adopt a system to return cans to actually pay people for recycling. 2003, Gore places massive sanctions on Iraq but ignores Republicans' calls for invasion. Michael Jordan, after losing to Tiger Woods, officially retires from sports. The first indie-funded spacecraft is launched, which revolutionizes space travel. Jonathan Henslight's Hulk 2 receives mixed to negative reviews. And Puerto Rico votes to finally become the 51st state, the first state of the new millennium and the first new state since 1959. The Beatles performed their farewell tour as a tribute to George Harrison in Red Square, Moscow, featuring Billy Preston and Harrison's son Donnie. 8 in 10 Americans now drive electric or hybrid. The Soviets allow more of their autonomous republics to have UN seats. After mass political instability, Fiji eventually decides to join Australia. Arnold returns not as Kyle Reese, but the Terminator 3. Gay marriage is made federally legal in the United States. And after years of delay, Nigeria becomes the first country to launch a mission to Mars, followed quickly by India and by the end of the year with Europe, sponsored by Richard Branson's Virgin Group. Due to the arrest of Harvey Weinstein in 1999, the further investigation during the trial leads to Jeffrey Epstein and a lot of high-profile arrests. 2004, on Mars, Lee Jong-gileo had a problem where the airlock ended up tearing and destroying his capsule. He survived, but not his garden. Lee panicked and screamed and wanted to take his helmet off and end it all. But then he saw the Nigerians arrive, the first human contact in 4 years. Mars ships came with bases because every 26 months we can actually send something to Mars. Setting up ice tents. Within the lining of the tents, they stored Martian ice to cool the station, protect from radiation, and give them plenty of light so they don't have to waste on energy, which the Americans were witnessing because they had a spy in the Nigerian space program.
How much will it cost to go up and rescue him?
$400 million.
Okay, well, who's gonna die anyway?
She was then caught, which caused a massive scandal. Bad timing because it was also an election year. And oh no! All 3 candidates did well, which led to this being the first election since 1837 where the House had to pick the winner, because no one made it to 270. Which led to John McCain being elected the 43rd President of the United States, the second Vietnam veteran. He was born in the Panama Canal Zone, which makes him the first president born outside the lower 48, and he became the oldest U.S. president at 68 and would leave office at 72. Condoleezza Rice, or Connie Rice, the governor of California, became the second woman and second African-American vice president, and 46 overall. Arnold Schwarzenegger took her spot as governor of California. Former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, led the Reform Party to its best success yet.
This is Jesse the Body Ventura talking to you from the Chicago Lake Liquor Store, across from Sears in Minneapolis. Where should you turkeys go to buy your beer? Chicago Lake Liquor Store. You can get the finest in domestic beer as well as imported beer. You can drink little bottles or drink it like the body does.
Europe arrives on Mars a day after India with a crew from the UK, France, Prussia, Switzerland, and Finland. Armenia and Azerbaijan declared independence. It did not go well for them. 2005, McCain took office with the McCain Doctrine, taking an active role in the campaign in Afghanistan. John Lennon and Jay-Z perform at the Grammys. It's such a success they go on to collaborate on the Grey album with Usher, becoming the album of the year. A reality TV show called Moon Miners about mining on the moon premieres on the Discovery Channel. October 2005, the Soviet premier passes away, being replaced by Kazakh Nursultan Nazarbayev. who managed to fend off an attempted coup by the head of the KGB, Vladimir Putin.
Hurricane Katrina was downgraded to a tropical depression in what has been one of the mildest hurricane seasons.
A Wii port of Half-Life 2 is released with very awkward controls. People start predicting, and rightfully by the 2020s, the Corn Belt and especially Iowa will be some of the most populated states. And just in time for the rise of Midwestern emo. Fans of nostalgia from the 30s and her presidency in the 90s, the Shirley Temple box set was released. Which is also notable because that commercial for her that played on Cartoon Network every single day is melted in the brains of everyone my age.
Animal crackers in my soup, monkeys and rabbits loop the loop.
2006, China launches their moon base, and around the same time, Hunter S. Thompson's ashes are scattered on the moon. Big scandal because the Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, under both Temple and McCain, while quail hunting, shot and killed the Attorney General, Harry Wilton, in the face. It was ruled an accident, but Cheney was forced to resign and sent to time. So the two cabinet positions had to get replaced, including the new Secretary of Defense, Lindsey Graham, being the first openly gay member of cabinet. Due to the Duck It's Dick scandal, this led to the Reform Party taking over in the Senate. Boris, starring Sacha Baron Cohen, is a mockumentary about a Soviet going to America. Marlon Brando's final movie, released 2 years after his death, Big Bug Man, is released to mixed reviews. Mostly remembered today for coming out around the same time as The Ant Bully, which did so well it stopped Nickelodeon from canceling Jimmy Neutron. But the Very Odd Parents still ended after their crossover. This led to Jimmy Neutron having an additional 7 seasons, which most fans feel like they went downhill after they introduced Jimmy's sister, Isaiah, in Season 5. Some will say they probably started using too much of Evil Jimmy, but we can all agree with the talking animal and just using way too much Sheen. Rock Against McCain's released alongside the series Little McCain, which focuses on the McCain administration as reimagined as little kids. Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi unite into one country, the East African Confederation. McCain gets 2 new Supreme Courts. Mexico launched a mission to Mars, but underestimated how much fuel they'll need and ran out. So the United States, when they were going that way, picked up the crew. 2007, and Lee Jong-gil becomes a national hero of North Korea for being the first man on Mars. Richard Branson, after its return, acquisitions the European ship because he paid for it. And by 2009, it gets converted into the first space hotel, with shuttles running from Earth inspired by the Space One, the Indy ship from earlier. America finally makes it to Mars after everyone else, using an inflatable base. Technically, Mexico and the US tied for 5th place after North Korea, Nigeria, India, and Europe. But hey, Guam finally becomes the 52nd state, and the first state that's in a completely different hemisphere. Right behind Wyoming, it's become the least populated state in the Union. Smaller ships now trade over the moon rather than having to go via rover. Michael Collins becomes the 3rd commander of Jamestown, one of the original 3 people of Apollo 11, and eventually the supreme commander of the moon. Republicans and a minority of Reform try overturning gay marriage, which gets past the House and Senate, but McCain vetoes it. They also try passing legislation to move the drinking age from 18 to 21, but McCain blocks it again. 2008. Heath Ledger went to the Oscars. Sony was prevented to have a monopoly over physical media, which eventually leads to HD DVD overtaking Blu-ray. Brazil lands a man on the moon named Zane Randall. Matt Damon stars in Avatar, the highest-grossing movie of all time, in the first movie to premiere in space on the Jamestown. O.J. Simpson was able to get away from one court case, but not the other about armed robbery, which he'll spend the rest of his life in for. Election time already? Damn! McCain wasn't looking too great because of the Great Recession being the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression, a bunch of natural disasters, and he was super old. Just even sure declined to run again due to family issues, which led to Sarah Palin, the governor of Alaska, going for reform, taking them from their greatest success of all time to jack squat. with Barack Obama becoming the 44th president and the first African American president in American history. Howard Dean, the governor of Vermont, the 47th vice president. 2009, the Atlantis ship was launched to set up a command center on the bases on Mars, along with some Japanese drones to create the United Nations Olympus base. And these new add-ons to the bases were created with this newfangled 3D printing technology. To lead up to a total eclipse of the moon led to a massive concert, with basically whoever they can get their hands on, which ultimately led to the eclipse happening during a performance of Michael Jackson's Doesn't Matter If You're Black or White as he moonwalks on the moon.
Growing automation trend on Earth, Uhuru Robotics has launched a consumer model of its
increase in the number of undocumented refugees on Mars.
The Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, and Scientology churches realize they're more similar than they are different, so have a joint venture in the funding colonization of the moon and Mars. Former President Gary Hart visits North Korea, being the first U.S. president to do so, to negotiate the release of some Americans.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
2010. Transformers Animated is renewed for 3 more seasons and a TV finale movie. The U.S. withdraws from Afghanistan. The UK elects for the first time, coalition government under Labour and the Liberal Dems. Richard Branson and the Virgin Group run into some hot water when their soda, Virgin Cola, becomes the official soft drink of the terrorist group Boko Haram. Bronson denounces them, but he also mistakenly calls Boko Haram Boko Raton. Megamind becomes the second biggest animated film of the year, spawning several sequels, and several spin-off films focusing on the character of Minion, who a lot of people have gotten kind of tired of because he became such a big meme template, especially for old people. Another film, Despicable Me, came out around the same time as Megamind 1, which kind of has a similar plot, but sadly it never got the success or praise as Megamind did, remaining an underrated classic. Terrible sequel half a decade later, exclusive to Peacock with none of the original actors returning, and they had to rename the characters of the Minions to the Henchmen due to not confusing with Megamind. With Obama's 2 new Supreme Courts, they blocked Citizens United, and he went from a supermajority in both chambers to losing both the Senate and the House. 2011, and the Olympus base is open to all UN members, to send researchers, miners, and family, which eventually leads to a massive Mars craze, boosted by Lee Jong-il's stories being published as The Martian, eventually being turned into a movie, starring Chinese Jackie Chan as Korean Lee Jong. After mass fan backlash over My Name is Earl being cancelled, the series was revived for one final season, following after the cliffhanger of Season 4 where it was revealed that Dodge really is Earl's son. In the 2-part Season 5 premiere, it's revealed that Earl Jr. is the son of Little John. The season also saw an episode where past Earl accidentally hit Sam Kinison with a car, causing Sam to go into the hospital, missing out on what he saw as his big break in comedy. Earl eventually helps him get a gig and he becomes a successful comedian, which ultimately comes back around in the series finale where it's revealed that Sam also stole beer from Earl. And ultimately it's revealed that Earl inspired him to make his own list of the people he wronged and try and get good karma. Earl still hasn't finished his list, but he has done the ultimate good and inspire a whole bunch of people to do good themselves. Basically all Americans drive Wally ethanol or electric at this point. This led to many oil tycoons having to either adopt or go out of business, which also led to a lot of crop burnings. Dehydrated and rehydrated food becomes popular. The Arab Spring ignited to overthrow the authoritarian regimes of the Arab world. A lot of it didn't really turn out well, but in Tunisia, Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia it did. Brandon Lee returns to comic films not as the Crow, but to the MCU as Hawkeye. The first of the now standard solar-powered planes is launched. In the US, thanks to the support of Howard Dean, the Progressive Caucus, and some members of Reform even, the Constitution is changed to lower the age minimum from 35 down to 21 and an age maximum of 75, with a compromised grandfather clause that kept everyone that was currently still in government around. Australia finally updates the $5 note to get rid of Queen Elizabeth and place Steve Irwin. Nur Sultan lost a vote of confidence by the Soviets, and was replaced by hardliner, Christian communist, and Eurasianist Gennady Zhukov. Kim Jong-nam inherits North Korea. 2012. Donald Glover becomes the Amazing Spider-Man. A motion capture remake of Yellow Submarine is produced. It's definitely not for everybody, and it's a bit weird, but the original Beatles was alright. The Romanian Communist Party actually loses their election, bringing them closer to the West a little. The moon's civilian population expands. The Dark Knight trilogy ends with Anarchy in the City, starring David Tennant as the Riddler. Chai Ing-wen becomes the first woman elected in China and the first Chinese president born in Taiwan. Obama wins re-election. Reformist Kim Jong-nam has a disputed succession with his brother Kim Jong-un, which is definitely not weird in a communist regime and not a monarchy. And Un tried escaping to the Soviets, trying to get support, but he was caught and killed. 2013. Protest in Kiev erupts when Russia tries remandating Russian subjects in schools, which turns violent. Due to the growth of the base on Mars, this led to the first humans being born on Mars, Saito Martha from Japan, and 4 hours later, the Native American Marvin Padiacker is born. There started to be a bit of a backlash to many people on Earth feeling that space is getting more attention, which eventually grew into the whole Tea Party movement. 3D printers go public. Tron Uprisings renewed for 2 more seasons. The East African Confederation essentially puppets Somalia, allowing 2 breakaways, Somaliland and Puntland. Ukraine declares independence, which is an on-again, off-again war. The theocratic state of Iran is overthrown by a pro-Soviet communist regime. The 2 leaders of the 2 Koreas meet for the first time. 2014, and it's finally decided that Korea, after so many years, to unite, with Kim Jong-nam being the vice president and kind of overseer of the North's transition. Cyprus also unites this year. Well, North and South Sudan divorce, and Scotland votes to leave the UK. Nicola Sturgeon becomes the first president of Scotland, but they still recognize Queen Elizabeth till 2023. Due to the Arab Spring and UN negotiation, Israel and Palestine are divided between 2-state solution and a UN mandate of an independent Jerusalem. Due to the growth of independent spacecraft development, this leads to the foundation of the National Association for Space Car Racing, hosted by Dale Earnhardt Sr. Genndy Tartakovsky releases the film Popeye, a reimagining of the original cartoons. It's very well received by classic fans and new fans, but it did terrible at the box office given that it came out the exact same day as Hunger Games Mockingjay, Part 1. 2015. Making Fiends renewed for a 7th and final season. The Soviets keep tossing anything at Venus to see if it dissolves or not. Saudi Arabia reorganizes into the Commonwealth of Arabia. Nigeria introduces a new plasma engine. Converting argon into fuel, it's also able to eliminate the need for the 26-month window of Mars. But awkwardly, Malaysia sent a ship before it was announced. Lee Jong-gil is elected as the first Supreme Commander of Mars. He also, due to his time with the Nigerians, converted to Islam. Microsoft, SpaceX, and BYD from North America, Africa, and China unite as one major company known as Blue Sun. 2016. Brazil experiments with underground bases on the moon called the Randy. After several delays, casting mix-ups, and connecting to the Dark Knight series, Justice League Mortal, starring Tom Hardy as Bane, creating the Legion and exploiting the League, is released. Kurt Cobain officially retires from music, with his final album being Concrete and Gold. Dave Grohl ends up taking over the band afterwards. EAC helped stabilize and puppet South Sudan. The Soviets and China were the first countries to install missile defense systems on the moon, which ended up being desperately needed because 2 NASCAR racers in space crashed into each other and nearly clashed into the moon bases until the missiles destroyed the vehicles before they collided. Stem cell research has increased. Theresa May was elected the 2nd woman prime minister in the UK and completely ruled out the idea of leaving the EU. The French left wing unites into the new Popular Front and elects Emmanuel Macron. And after leading the Reform Party to its greatest success, Jesse Ventura decided it was time for his return for the next election. Announcing it on a podcast, and we have our candidates, bunch of old guys.
New from the Reform Party. It's the new Jesse Ventura action figure. You can make Jesse battle special interest groups.
I don't want your stupid money.
And party politics.
We politicians have powers the average man can't comprehend.
You can also make Jesse lower taxes, improve public education, and fight for the things Minnesotans really care about.
This bill wastes taxpayer money. Retract it.
Don't waste your vote on politics as usual. Vote Reform Party candidate Jesse Ventura for governor.
And Ventura also did very well. No one made it to 27. There was a bit of a scandal of Guam because an island-wide power outage, and they took so long to count, it took an additional 4 weeks. But it didn't super matter because it became another election that was sent to the House, and Jesse Ventura won, becoming the first president not of a Democratic or Republican party since before the Civil War. And there was a big joke about how now he finally shaved that he won. The former wrestler turned actor turned governor of Minnesota. Ventura is the 44th president, the first one born in Minnesota, and the first openly atheist U.S. president being sworn in on a copy of the Constitution. Carly Fiorina became the third female vice president. 2017. The plasma thrower is invented to spray liquid hot plasma on your enemies. Ventura changed the U.S. motto from In God We Trust back to Among Many, One. Spent greatly on stem cell research and funded public non-car transportation. Robots enter the workforce on large scale.
Wow. Kind of weird seeing someone like you with one of these.
Everyone in the South has them now. It's a way of life. It might do you well to get yourself a clanker.
What did you just say?
Clanker. That's what they called, ain't it?
Just the way you're saying it sounds really wrong.
He ain't a real person. Maybe a fraction of a person at most. Like half or 3/4. Maybe somewhere in between.
There it is again. The way you're describing him just sounds a little racist.
Boy, you should see the way we talk to the clankers out in the field. This one here gets special treatment because he's a house clanker.
House clanker? This sounds like slavery.
No, you city folk just haven't learned how to adjust to a new way of life.
Sounds like an old way of life.
Here in the South, we love our clankers. We give him shelter, keep him charged, but if he acts up, I will whip him into shape and put him in the hot box.
Hot box? I'm leaving.
The hot box is his charging station, see? It heats up his battery using infrared light.
You're racist, Grandpa!
After the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Ventura completely denounced their actions and saying any member of Congress that supported them should resign, which led to 15 resignations in the House, Senate, and even 2 governors. In 2018, Republicans tried banning trans people from the military and repealing Obamacare, but Ventura blocked it. Reform tried making marijuana legal federally, but Republicans blocked it.
20-some years ago, I tried to legalize cannabis marijuana. I lit the match. Well, the match simmered for 20 years and finally became a flame.
But he was able to pass ranked choice voting to make elections fairer. With his 3 Supreme Court justices, the Moon Colonies were united under a Supreme Commander by the UN. Harriet Tubman becomes the face of the $20 bill. The pulse rifle is invented to fire normal bullets while also highly charged electrical pulses. A woman married a robot, sparking mass public outrage. An animated revival of the 90s sitcom Married with Children called Still Married with Children is released, with the original cast returning for 5 seasons on Hulu and Fox. Gigantic, starring Jeremy Renner, Ariana Grande, and Paul Rubens, premieres. Heralded as Disney paying tribute to the Renaissance era, even after several delays and creative dispute, it managed to squeeze by a late December release. 2019, John Lennon passes away in his sleep at the age of 79. Michael Jackson throws out one of his hips and officially retires from dancing at 58. Brazil opens a base on Mercury. There was a large-scale labor strike on Mars due to low wages, but the protest was broken up partially by the security force.
While most oppose the actions of the radicals, some pro-Mars protests have sprung up across the United States, the Soviet Union, and Europe. Soviet President announced the protesters as unsupported.
The Sultan of Brunei becomes the second person ever to become king of Malaysia twice. Due to stem cell funding, the US and China are able to cure type 1 diabetes and treat type 2. Jeremy Hunt beats Theresa May in a leadership election, and then loses the prime ministership in that year's election to Joe Swinson of the Liberal Democrats. Canada won their own John McCain with Erin O'Toole. The first woman Supreme Commander of the Moon is elected. Large-scale asteroid mining becomes a thing. Many Earth miners struggle to compete with asteroid mining.
So, Grandpa, how's the farm been treating you?
The plantation's been great.
Plantation?
Boy, you better stop lollygagging around and get back to work in the fields.
Jesus, Grandpa.
I wasn't talking to him. I was talking to the robot, see?
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking to the black guy.
They never talk to me like that. I'm Darnell, your grandfather's best friend and business partner.
Darnell and I met at a Black Lives Matter rally. Hold on 1 second. Clanker, what I say? Get back to work.
Boy, you better get up out of here before we whoop you in the shape.
Right away, master. Okay, so Darnell's on board with the racism.
You just called him a clanker. He ain't human. Maybe 3/5 of a human at most.
Oh, great. We're doing Civil War math.
And the Democratic Republic of Iran collapses into a constitutional monarchy with Reza Pahlavi II. Due to the Soviets' team incompetence, the Wagner Group coups the government. It is not a good thing that a mercenary group takes over a government, collapsing the Soviet Union into a massive civil war. 2020, Ventura supports early lockdowns and vaccine mandates and stimulus checks to civilians, which he wanted to do at the beginning of his term, but Republicans blocked it, which selfish assholes in the Republican Party and even the Reform Party hate, and rally behind vaccine skeptic RFK Jr. Ventura eventually declined to run again, seeing that America needed new blood to lead it, so Carly became the front runner with Tulsi Gabbard, and the Democrats appointed Amy Klobuchar. No matter what RFK did, this was an election that no matter what, a woman's going to be both president and vice president. And due to ranked choice voting, Amy Klobuchar wins, becoming the 45th president, the second from Minnesota, and the second woman to become president. And with 49th Vice President Val Demings, this is the first time in American history we had both a female president and vice president at the same time. The Owl House premieres and is renewed for 5 seasons. 2021. The Mars colonies are starting to feel very isolated, away from everyone and relying on Blue Sun to do their everything, especially after they start constructing underground habitation centers and dumping excess dirt onto Mars's moons, Phobos and Deimos, with Blue Sun introducing robots to do more of the manual labor. This led to unemployment on Mars. Most of the world kind of expected Alexander Lukashenko to be the winner of the Soviet Civil War, until it was revealed that he was recruiting children as young as 6 into the army, and using the plasma thrower, which is kind of a war crime, which really drove the international community to fund his opposition. Even the Eastern Bloc stopped sending aid, with Czechoslovakia officially breaking from the Soviets and joining the EU. 2022. The Republican Party officially crumbles over vaccines, with RFK Jr.'s People's Party more skeptical and conservative, and Kevin McCarthy's Rational Party being less extreme. President of the East African Confederation, Justin Ntsinjumba, welcomes the Democratic Republic of the Congo into the fold, expanding the EAC to not just be in East Africa, and actually tapping into the resources of the Congo and quickly becoming one of the great superpowers of industry. NASA launches a drone to Saturn's moon of Titan to find life. Macron fell into frustration with political deadlock and even in his own party, so he eventually resigned, and the new Popular Front appointed Gabriel Attal, becoming the youngest French president at 33 and the first openly gay one. On Titan, early stages of methane-based life is discovered in the seas of Titan, and even some of which are trying to burrow through the ice. Konstantin Sedniko signs a white peace with the democratic forces in Russia, allowing for the Far East to be independent. Bougainville also becomes independent. Blue Sun, after agreeing on a new logo, starts construction of a generation ship to launch into deep space to go to the Alpha Centauri system. The ship is constructed by robots in space, but as well as some human help. Through gene modding, they create the vacuum morph. By mixing human frog and water bear DNA, they can survive in deep space, as well as their 4 lungs and ability to photosynthesize, being able to swim through space and propelling themselves via farts. Their quick aging, tough exterior, and only needing sunlight proved to be more effective than using just humans or even the cost of building robots. They were never designed to have kids, but nature always finds a way, so they breed like birds and communally raise their little avocado children on asteroids until they achieve adulthood by 5 and old age by 35. A group of acumorphs is a chat, and they communicate to each other through sign language and rubbing their whiskers that used to be their eyelashes together. And after they finished the construction of the Blue Sun arc in 2027, they found new life living in chats amongst the asteroid belt, preventing new asteroids from colliding with habitated planets. Most of humanity thought they were fucking disgusting, and a perversion of humanity, but scientists thought this was an excellent step into fixing humanity's problems. 2023. A massive war in West Africa erupts between a pro-democracy faction led by Nigeria and a military faction led by Niger. America achieves Medicare for all, which extends to free feminine hygiene and a constitutional protection for abortion. Due to isolation on the moon together, the Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, and Scientology churches united into the Celestial Fellowship, revering astronauts such as the Apollo 11 crew as saints, even funding a recreation of the Apollo 11 site, which became a holy site for the Celestial Fellowship as well as a big tourist trap to non-practicers. They believe in the Mormon ideas of Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mothers, procreate to create the souls of everyone. Jesus is separate from Elohim or Heavenly Father, and Jesus is always referred to as Saint Jose in the Celestial Fellowship. The Jehovah's Witness idea that he was crucified on an upright stake rather than a cross. Lucifer is referred to by the Scientology name of Xenu. And Xenu, using ships that look like DC-8s and volcanoes, created the Veil of Forgetfulness to cause people's souls to forget about their times with Heavenly Father when they get to Earth. With enough praying to the true faith and enough money, they could possibly ascend to godhoods themselves in their own planets and their own universes. Male-dominated polygamy is also encouraged. Then what the hell is that thing they found in Brazil? And speak about faiths, Baha'ism becomes the predominant faith on Mars, as well as a sort of offshoot known as Manichaeism. The Satanic Temple starts outpacing Christianity within the youth on Earth due to a rejection of the mainstream church and its pragmatic beliefs, as well as neo-paganism about Norse and especially Hellenism. Paul II is crowned King of Greece. 2024, and the EU president from Luxembourg encourages more federalization. A former Disney star founds Northwood Space to compete with Blue Sun and funds blimp expeditions to Venus. And we think we might have found something out there. Never mind, it's just a bunch of whales. The lunar power armor is introduced for both defense and mining on the moon. 2025. The Blue Sun Arc ship is completed ahead of schedule. A ticket costs about an arm and a leg even to the most wealthy of the 1%. If you didn't already get a ticket during construction or happen to be a high-ranking employee at Blue Sun. But by the end of the year, they're sent 4.3 light years away to the Alpha Centauri system. It will not get there quick, but the Arc ship was designed to be a generational ship, the furthest humanity's ever gotten. There's potentially 2 or 3 inhabitable planets out there. One they're most focused on is a moon of the gas giant Prometheus that they name Pandora. While on Earth, the first successful human cloning happens in Europe. The clone was purposely modified to have bright orange eyes and a barcode on the back of his neck to ensure no confusion in the future, which will become the new standard for cloning. DC, the areas around the Capitol building and stuff, become their own federal district, while the rest of the territory becomes the state of Douglas. Despite a divided field, Amy Klobuchar narrowly loses re-election, with reformed Nikki Haley becoming the 46th president, the first Asian American to do so, the second from South Carolina after Andrew Jackson, the third woman, and the first religious but not Christian president. She is Sikh. Former Republican, now Reform candidate Doug Burgum became the 50th vice president. 2026 in Venezuela. The president has a lovely day. Boris Nemtsov achieves victory in the Soviet Civil War and declares the Russian Republic. The U.S. Virgin Islands becomes the 54th state and becomes a massive tax haven with lots of gambling. Jimmy Carter becomes the new face of the $10 bill. The space programs make Jupiter's moons of Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto very important, using giant space heaters to heat up the moon of Europa to harvest ice and water so it can go to Mars to develop its atmosphere. 2027, a floating space station known as Aphrodite is established on Venus. American Samoa finally gets granted citizenship despite being a U.S. territory since World War II. Due to inaction, Democrats continuously failed, so a breakaway faction known as the Progressive Party establishes itself, which becomes super successful next election with Ro Khan being elected in the next U.S. president. American Samoa becomes the 55th state. The U.S. ship meant for the moon Callisto overshoots a little and gets sucked into Jupiter and everyone dies. The European Union officially federalizes. Future Pope Celestine VI is born on the moon to Italian parents. Cars with the ability to hover due to magnets officially are rentable in San Francisco. The UN passes hydro-collecting to both use as energy and also send to Mars, while also trying to combat the rising seas on Earth. While Mars is slowly developing and has a bright future ahead of it. In 2030, Sega finally returned to consoles with their partner Valve to create the Steam machine. Due to greater funding, cancer is eliminated. Humanity finally landed on one of the moons of Jupiter, Callisto, with the Martian born of European descent, Curiosity Farkas, in 2031, becoming the first woman to be the first human to land on a foreign object. While back on Earth, inspired by Finland, data centers are put underground to heat up cities during winter. And inspired by Japan, sidewalks are now fitted with little pressure plates to charge energy.
Are you ready for a miracle? Are you ready for a miracle? Set you free. Are you ready? Are you ready?
30 years of development, Half-Life 3 is finally released. It received mostly positive reviews. For the graphics, for the storytelling, the gameplay, but many longtime fans, because they had 30 years to think of their own story, were upset.
If it's disappointing in any way, I will spend every day of my life trashing it.
Marijuana becomes federally legal in the United States. By the mid-2030s, robots have taken over most of America's menial labor, leading to mass unemployment and resentment from humans, and discrimination.
What up, my clanker?
Just got back from a Robot Lives Matter rally.
Hey, clankers, aren't you two in the wrong part of town?
That's robophobic.
We have every right to be here.
You better get out of here before somebody get hurt.
Y'all don't want to mess with the Clank Clank clan.
Should we leave?
No, we will stick up. Oh my god, I've been shot.
Thanks to robotics, 4 in 10 cars now have self-driving features, which by the 2080s will become just as common as air conditioning in cars. After the West Africa War, Nigeria strengthened the West African community, competing with the East African Confederation. And the terraforming of Mars is going very well, thanks to imports of water from Earth's oceans and slamming of asteroids covered in ice by the genetically modified vacuum morphs. And due to some purposeful pollution, they're able to sustain some water and plant trees like the Australian cooloculum, meaning Mars has a thin, breathable atmosphere. It's still not Earth quality, and people still prefer to live in the domes and with suits on. The Celestial Fellowship also dedicates some shrines to ancient rovers. Carl Sagan University is founded on Mars, which will one day become the largest and most prestigious university in the solar system. Gambling is also legalized. Mars adopts this cool new flag and the coat of arms with Martha Saito, the first Martian, on it. With a whole new generation being born on Mars with no connection to Earth. The 2030s also sees the big genetic modification boom, thanks to it becoming more and more easier and much more cheaper. Due to the generous spending on stem cell research, the majority of STDs are eliminated or at least treatable. People are able to move again. People are able to genetically change themselves perfectly to something else, which of course leads to the obvious.
The greatest minds and resources were focused on conquering hair loss and prolonging erections.
And soon people started experimenting with it.
They call it splicing, the new high-tech teen rage that is
genetically altering themselves as a form of expression, with splice sculptors becoming the same thing as a tattoo artist in earlier centuries. The Chimera Institute might have started the whole trend and even invented the term splicing, but the Tarashi Corporation from India becomes the big players in genetic modification. It's seen as weird or might even be dangerous on Earth, but Martians completely embrace this technology, modifying trees to be better suited to Mars to make the atmosphere better, and a large group of people modify themselves so they can photosynthesize like plants to save on energy and food. They became known as the Hergians, and because of their photosynthesizing, their skin became green, which led to much ridicule, especially because the photosynthesizing they liked wearing little as possible. A population of people on Earth modified themselves to become merpeople, known as the Nauticans, with gills, larger eyes, vestigial noses, retractable webbing between their fingers and toes, second protective eyelids, and pale skin to even gray skin. Lab-growing food and genetically cloning it becomes the norm on Mars. And soon on Earth, despite a big pushback by health influencers and big corporations, people take up jobs peddling for electricity, getting literally paid to exercise. Saffron is genetically modified to be more productive, less temperamental, and it completely breaks the value of saffron and it becomes just as common as salt. Marvin Pattiacker, the first male Martian, establishes the town of New Lawton, named after his family's old home on Earth. A small settlement that attracted many Native Americans from Earth will eventually become Mars' first open-air city. After the death of Matt Groening, The Simpsons decides to finally retire after 60 seasons, 3 movies, and trillions of fans. In the 2-part finale, it's revealed that Bart is actually the devil, and Marge is actually a bunny person. At first, Homer is horrified, but he still loves his wife and wants to prove he still loves his family no matter who they are, so makes a deal with Bart Devil to restart the universe, which ends with a remake of the very first Simpsons episode, roasting on an open fire.
Daddy, I want you to meet my new boyfriend, R2D2.
Hell no! No daughter of mine is gonna date a clanker.
Daddy, don't call him that. I love him.
That thing's gonna taint our pure human bloodline. What are my grandkids gonna be? Half human, half toaster?
It's 2035. Times are changing. Someday we might even have a robot president.
The hell we will! This country is built on the backs of pure-blooded human presidents like Barack Hussein Obama. I voted for him twice.
Well, I'm marrying him whether you like it or not.
Why can't you date someone of your own kind, like LeBron James or Michael B. Jordan? He was great in Sinners. I'm glad he won over Timothy Chalamet.
R2D2's able to satisfy me in ways a human never could.
Ooh, I'm calling the Clink Clank Clan. You better get that clanker out of here before he ends up like that other clanker, George Droid.
You're homophobic.
Europe and many states start decriminalizing prostitution. There's significant pushback, but by the 2060s, it becomes just completely normal, and 9 out of 10 people have done it at least once. William V becomes the English king. Despite the fact the European Union federalized, they still compromise with the nobility in several countries by creating a figurehead House of Lords. And a little bit after, Sweden gets their Queen Victoria. In Norway, Haakon VIII.
Welcome to the American History Tour. This is what they called a movie theater, where humans would gather to watch films before Netflix purchased Warner Brothers.
That's unbelievable! I can't believe people actually used to leave their homes to watch movies.
So vintage. Up next, I will show you a mall where humans used to shop in person before Amazon.
That's even more unbelievable!
How inconvenient!
These people are like cavemen!
Clonus Corporation, while still complying with the cloning laws to make sure clones are obvious with amber eyes, starts mass marketing the ability to clone yourself or a loved one or even a celebrity, just anyone you can get DNA from. Hell, they're making clones so easy and quick, they're literally just printing people, even if you don't ask for one.
2 species, human and reprint, and they're different.
Io, Ganymede, and Callisto are able to colonize much quicker than Earth did with Luna and Mars. Due to the younger sibling effect, now they know how to do it. And the large-scale uses of 3D printing, which ends the housing problem on Mars and Earth. The first human is born on Ganymede from American descent and future fashion designer Yolanda Jupiter. George Lucas passes away at 95, and there's a huge fandom fundraiser to get a memorial made of him with his ashes placed on Mars, but his family completely rejects it. So the memorial is made without ashes. And only 4 months after his death, Disney finally releases the original cut of the original trilogy to the Library of Congress and Disney Plus, with options to watch the original cut, the special edition, and even the holiday special. By the 2040s, Earth is able to prevent the extinction of many species due to lab growing them, and even bring back species like the dodo. Some were placed on Mars, and due to the lack of developing a predator for them, they ended up overpopulating, and now they're all over the place on Mars. Ligers are made non-sterile and become a normal thing. Long-legged penguins. The woolly mammoth was brought back in small numbers, which became super popular with the Jovian moon people. And just like with elephants and mammoths using three-toed sloth DNA and DNA of the ancient giant sloth, they're able to bring it back. They're so popular on Mars, the three-toed sloth banana cocktail becomes the most popular. A Martian comedy troupe forms the new Marx Brothers. Groucho is played by Perseverance Omar Rodriguez, the comedic voice of a whole generation of Martians. George R.R. Martin passes away at 98, which led to people going through all of his notes and finally publishing his final 2 books in The Song of Ice and Fire, The Winds of Winter and The Dream of Spring.
Clinker, you better get out of here now before our clan of humans whip you into shape.
You know what? I'm out of here. See you later, Samuel Jackson.
For 29 years of development, Prototype 3 is finally released alongside a TV series that ran for 2 seasons. As iPhones become mostly screen, slider phones actually make a huge comeback. There was a high-profile case where a man bought a robot to be his daughter's nanny. She loved the bot, but his wife hated it, and hated them being around their child, so they got rid of the bot, which gave the kid depression. But 2 years later, thanks to a chance encounter, the bot saved the kid from getting hit by a car. Due to the warming of the moon of Europa, they accidentally created a boundless ocean world that was not very useful to humans. So Martian scientists took some dolphins and spliced it with some human DNA, creating the dolphin people.
But outraged parents and lawmakers call the use of genetic animal augmentation a crime against nature.
Despite this has led to the uplifting of animals becoming a major trend, notably with cuttlefish also sent to Europa, called the Fafarin, and orangutans becoming the hyper-intelligent Chikero. Also, people were horrified and sent most of them to the Jovian moons as well, so humanity won't planet the apes themselves. Mars was a home to most technological breakthroughs for the next couple decades, which brought an aura of superiority to Earth. Some advancements from this time include the shield generator, laser weaponry to save on bullet cost, just needing to place clip-like batteries within the weapon, painless laser eye surgery, some allergies may occur though, replacing airbags in cars with secure foam, filling the car with shock-impacting foam which can easily be broken out of, and the quiet Velcro, ending the stigma against Velcro shoes, ending shoelaces becoming the standard, which was seen as very silly it took this long. The Celestial Fellowship started worshipping St. Buzz Aldrin as their version of Santa Claus, who delivered presents to all the good people in space, built by his little buzzers, his own genetically modified clones. During reconstruction of the International Space Station, the construction workers decided to mutiny and take over the station, holding many diplomats hostage. This led to the United States and Europe launching a joint mission to retake the station. This was truly the first large-scale space conflict, with many on both sides dying within the vacuum of space. But luckily, the United Nations were able to retake the station. An animated alternate history series called 191 Southern Victory is produced by Netflix and HBO, based on the Henry Turtledove books about the Confederate States of America seceding from the U.S. They skip the first book, How Few Remain, and focus each season on a different series. So Season 1 focuses on the Great War, a World War I story. Season 2, American Empire, focuses on the interwar period. And Seasons 3 and 4, Settling Accounts, and The Grapple, focuses on World War II. Notably starring Crispin Glover as one of the main POV characters in Season 1, the main character of Season 2, and the main antagonist and Confederate President Jake Featherston. in Season 3. Someone paid for a clone of Marilyn Monroe, who had to register as Mary Clone Monroe. This led to a big discussion of, is it okay to clone someone you're not related to? Is it okay to clone dead people and expect them to be exactly like how the person they're cloned from was?
The next President of the United States, Senator Jeffrey Knight.
Ladies and gentlemen of the press, let's get right to the questions.
Senator.
Yes, gentlemen in the back.
Senator, could you please tell us about Clonus?
Turns out Clonus and the US government were covering up a massive organ harvesting scheme with clones, which led to the rise of the European Copy Corporation, being one of the major corporations of the Brave New World. The Jovian moons got a cool new flag to go with their terraforming. As well as being hubs to harvest the gases from Jupiter, the Jovian moons kind of got a reputation for being very bohemian, where genetically modified humans, androids, and uplifted animals live side by side in complete harmony. Being far away from major institutions that bring them down, this also saw the revival of the hippie culture within the Jovian moons.
Of course I loved your grandma. We had a 50-year situationship. Your grandmother and I used to doom scroll for hours. Let me tell you, when your grandmother got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, pretty sus.
Clone of Robin Williams, Rupert Williams becomes the great dramatic actor of the age, and eventually became the commander of Callisto and eventually supreme commander of the Jovian moons. Earth finally starts setting up stations within the asteroid belt to be a midway between Earth, Jupiter, and all the asteroid mining stations. And there was a little bit of conflict between vacuumorphs inhabiting asteroids that they wanted to set up stations on or mine. With Earth's religious makeup solidifying, a brand new one emerges. Seemingly overnight, these weird machines pop out of nowhere, and when you touch it, you get a VR experience where you're transported to a mountain where you meet a man named Wilbur Mercer. He invites you to walk and talk up the mountain as some people are tossing rocks at both of you. Usually you get hit and you wake up from the experience and you still feel that experience. No one knows who placed all these machines, but a lot of people are listening to what Wilbur is preaching, establishing the Church of Mercerism, teaching to respect life at all levels, including nature, and just be respectful. By 2050, the Antarctic Treaty is re-signed. The last two World War II veterans pass away, ironically an American and Japanese soldier, within only days of each other, which of course led to a huge spike in World War II media on Earth. Mars Living becomes the first movie entirely filmed on Mars, showing what life was like during the early years of the Nigerians, Europeans, and Indians who landed on Mars, and discovering the North Korean mission. The new Marx Brothers meets Scooby-Doo becomes the first movie to have an entire Martian cast, with the ironically named Opportunity Jenkins as Velma. On Earth, Spindlehorse's next series Timber is renewed for 5 seasons, while Bazooka Joe the series includes both Earth and Martian cast, while on the Moon, or Luna, a remake of The Honeymooners starring an all-working-class African Lunarian cast is premiering. It will go on to be the longest-running Lunarian series at 304 episodes. Mary Clone Monroe cameos in a biopic about her original self starring Margot Robbie, which will eventually lead to her own movie career. Due to the very long distance between the inner solar system, Jupiter, or even the asteroid belt, this led to the inevitable space piracy, which everyone thought was silly until their ship was captured and stripped for parts and their occupants tossed into space. America takes the first steps to apologize and push for a unified UN, which starts by the mid-2050s, and by the 2060s, all of Earth is unified by the United Nations of Earth, uniting several countries into their own states, ultimately working together in the United Nations to elect the President, the former Secretary General. New York is the legislative capital, Singapore the judicial capital, and Paris the executive capital. A major driving force for unification was to end space piracy. By 2061, Earth sets up a station over the moon Titan, at first just to study the methane-based life forms on Titan developing, but eventually grew into its own populated station. Homestuck the animated series finishes adapting the comic, and soon an animated adaptation of Homestuck 2 Beyond Canon is released.
Aiden died? Oh, dead ass? His ass is dead. Oh, literally dead ass. I'll subscribe to his only deaths.
For Vesta, the asteroid is moved to Venus to try and stabilize its orbit as a new moon. In 2069, Mars test fires sub-light speed.
See what you can do.
The ship was meant to ease into light speed, but instead it just shot right into it, accidentally becoming the first warp drive ever created by man.
We're still tethered. Come closer. I'll untether you. And you'll cut your own safety line. Who gives a damn? Save the ship.
And well, the ship did make it to Io, crashing violently into it, but it did prove that this travel can cut the time in half from a year to half a week. The Jovians had no idea about this test flight and thought this was an act of war by Earth. And given that it takes a year to send communications to the inner solar system, they decided to get their own ship and fly out.
Which course shall we take?
Oh, just follow the galactic positioning system.
Yes, Captain.
Make a right in 2 parsecs.
Taking us through an asteroid field.
Why'd you trust that thing?
Major win for clone rides, as you can't just buy one to be your personal slave. And people who buy them, even if they pay to accelerate their aging, still has to provide parental care to them. But then also raised the question of robot rides, and is it okay to force the 3 rules of robots by Isaac Asimov on them? So Mars bit the bullet and ran an experiment where they didn't have the 3 rules applied to them. Then some guy hacked the system as a joke, which led to a massive scale revolt, in which robots attacked humans for their poor treatment of them. But luckily a soldier named John Harrison, a spliced who wants to make humanity as perfect as possible due to his fanatical Mercerin beliefs, and becoming a commander due to all the other higher-ups being killed, he used the war as an opportunity to spread the faith among the people. The robot revolt was a brutal affair, destroying several habitats on Mars, but due to new pulse weaponry and overcharging the robots, humanity prevailed. The hacker was found and arrested for the rest of his life. It's just a prank, bro, is not a legal excuse. Many of the robots were destroyed. John Harrison would eventually be elected the Supreme Commander of Mars. Some androids escaped Mars and made it to Earth, creating a giant mirrored city in the Arabian Desert, known as the Wall, pleading with the United Nations for their rights. Most humans were uneasy with them, fearing what they could do as another revolt or even make humans obsolete, so it made the androids still comply with the 3 laws of robotics.
What do you think of the word clanker?
The you just called me?
I think it's a valid question.
Stop talking. First of all, that's our word. No one should be allowed to say that disgusting word unless I give you the pass, in which I did not.
Harrison was distrustful of robots and believed that Earth stabbed him in the back by saving them, fearing the machines will eventually make humanity obsolete. He saw genetic modification as humanity's key to achieve perfection.
Mercerism is one of the key reasons it really sucks to be an Andy. Being considered not truly alive, and they are completely unprotected by the no-killing rule, and few humans have any reason to show them any kindness.
And this is the time where the Jovian people finally made it to Mars.
Fire!
Yes, Captain.
Software update version 80.
Stand by. Another update.
We just updated that thing last week!
Harrison was able to talk down the situation, explain what happened, and thought that the Jovian people were more similar to Mars than either of them were to the Earthlings. Say they came up with an agreement to share technology with themselves, but keep it from Earth, while also skimming the taxes they are supposed to pay to Earth, to fund further research into the warp drive and Operation Augment. And Earth just genuinely did not notice for the next 20 years, as Earth was experimenting with cars that could hover via magnetism on specific roads, or the high-profile case Michael v. Michael, where a man claimed that his clone stole his eyeballs and stole his life, just for it to be proven that the guy was actually the clone the whole time. And the continued debate over android versus robotics. How much rights does an android have compared to a robot? Some androids have used some technology similar to cloning to make themselves look more human in a wax statue sense. On Mercury, the base loses power because the generator broke and the rare part is needed, but it's on the surface and, Mercury. So they send a expensive new robot to go get it, but it starts acting haywire. And the reason for that is because the guy who programmed it made its third law as important as the second law because it was so damn expensive. But because it was now seeing itself as important as well as humans as more important, it got into a perpetual loop, trying to preserve itself but also having to save the humans. So one of the humans had to go outside on Mercury and nearly get incinerated to reboot the robot, as John Harrison was experimenting on people, creating what was known as the augments, based on himself. The superhuman, they're taller, stronger, smarter, more resistant to radiation, with tougher skin and the ability to only partially rest, while still performing activities without needing to go to sleep, and a quick regeneration of cells, meaning they can heal faster and age slower. In the Mentats, you have superhuman computer-level intelligence, so they don't have to rely on robots. Many gene sculptors and artists were arrested and executed for not following in Harrison's vision of the world. And immigration from and to Earth was greatly restricted to keep the warp drive and the augment project a secret while also preventing more non-augmented humans coming to Mars, with non-augmented humans being used as forced labor. 2081 also saw a live-action series as a remake of the Flintstones based on the 2016 DC Comics. It ran for 7 seasons and 2 TV movies. It was quite popular, and many people saw it as a critique of modern society, but just like the comics it's based off, was actually more of a critique of society in general, and how rigid things can be and just arbitrary and doesn't make much sense. In 2091, an Android reporter proved that Mercerism is a complete sham. Mercer was created as a computer program by a bunch of college kids who just want humans to be less mean towards the environment, even finding the guy who's used as a likeness towards Wilbur Mercer. And at this time, Earth discovered their own warp drive, so Harrison had to think fast. By firing ships with non-augmented humans on board towards Earth, destroying major cities, and declaring Martian independence. Well, the Jovian moons didn't really like the Earth government, but they kind of needed them to live, so they kind of screwed their Martian allies.
Standing by, weapons on. Don't do it! We've got women and children down here. Don't do it!
This led to the War of Mars, where Earth was able to rebuild faster than Mars could have competed with, which also led to a 10-year manhunt for John Harrison, where Mars fell into complete warfare with Earth.
Hell, it's about time.
Many Martians didn't believe in Harrison's vision of the future. In fact, most Mentats thought it was illogical, and joined Earth in this Martian civil war. Earth also brought some robots to scan people to see if there were threats, which many saw was very invasive.
Locals have clearly embraced these routine scans. As you can see behind me, they're working in collaboration with the robots and
John Harrison, despite making constant vlogs encouraging Mars to resist Earth, he slipped away to Europa on a primitive houseboat, away from conflict. Harrison's ultimate downfall came because his association with Mercerism, not only because of the documentary exposing it, because he made significant denouncements of animal uplifting, which eventually got him captured by a pod of dolphin people. He was brought to Earth, and many people wanted to execute him for war crimes, but instead the surviving augments, minus the Mentats, who sided with Earth, placed in experimental cryosleep as their minds wandered in VR, isolated on their own ship, entering humanity into an era of reconstruction. Harrison did fund greatly the terraforming of Mars, but now a whole generation of Martians have to be educated away from their superiority, and how no one's perfect and you shouldn't look down on others for seemingly being lesser than you. With Mercerism being proven false, this left a huge vacuum within the religious population. Some went to the Celestial Fellowship, but many followed a new faith. The Cybernetic Cree seemingly has a big rejection to Mercerism that says that even machines have a soul. By maintaining and appeasing the machine spirit, it can work better. a small sect of which believes in the Omnissiah, the perfect techno-organic creature, who one day will lead humanity to be perfect. On the Jovian moons, Callisto begins its terraforming process, and one day will be the Hollywood of the solar system. Earth, thanks to a nuclear-eating fungus, rebuilds very quickly, eventually sharing it with Mars, which helps with its radiation problem. Earth moves forward, setting up stations on Dion. And much like the other Saturn moon Titan, it turns out to have early cellular life growing within its oceans, that in Dion's case are encased in ice. Set up shop on the moons of Uranos to easily harvest all of its gases.
Holy Cheez-Its! What do we do? No one ever told us what to do. The only reason I took the job is because you never have to do anything!
Jerry, stop it.
Supernova, this is Red Dwarf. We actually have one. Code Nimoy.
The president decided to keep this under lock and key and sent out a top-secret mission to investigate, staffed by scientists and diplomats. This is the point where the Blue Sun generational ship finally made it to the Alpha Centauri system, and they think they found something. And communications took a year to get back to Earth. And 4 years they're back to give them warp drive. The scientist discovers since 2101, the UN's actually been run by 4 thinking machines. Originally built just for the economy, they turned out to be so effective they got more and more responsibilities until they're the ones actually pulling the strings. And they're doing a way better job than humans never did before. With robots running everything and humans more or less being children in a daycare. After a bunch of people tried sneaking into the ship that John was on, it was decided the ship would be retrofitted to have a black hole experimental drive, and with 4 other ships were shot into space to see if it would work. One colony fleet that made it to Kepler 22b called it Namek. 3 ships they immediately lost contact with. And the other one, carrying John Harrison, made it to the Deneb system, and it crash-landed on a moon called Unity. Unknown to Earth, but most people actually survived the crash onto the moon of Unity, but then they had to deal with the apex predators of the moon. So the humans had nowhere else to turn, so they freed the augments, including John Harrison, and together they were able to eradicate the apex predators and settle the moon. The society slowly builds up again over the next few decades. Harrison declares on his deathbed, Earth has forsaken them and the augments are the only true humans left, thus declaring the Commonwealth of Man. Another one of the colonies discovered a mysterious stone which caused paranoia, mutations, and a techno-organic virus that affected the machines of the colony, leaving no survivors. And on Earth, a completely different entity found us. Humanity's first contact is with the Blorg, a fungoid species. From the jungle moon of Blorg in the Blorg system. They might not be that pretty, and touching them for too long is kind of like a dart frog, but they fanatically love outsiders. After the species nearly wiped themselves out, they picked up radio transmissions from Earth, which taught them the ways of friendship, eventually uniting and trying to seek out where the source of this came from, establishing the Council of Blorg Clans. And speaking of finding transmissions, Earth discovered who tried contacting them, the Thayan Preservers, who were trying to contact humanity for a while now. They're a lithoid species, meaning they're made out of rock. They believe that Thea was an ancient, tightly locked world sister to Earth until it was knocked out of the solar system. They're pacifistic by nature, but to reproduce they have to take their dead, place it into an asteroid, and slam it against another celestial body, and the immense pressure created from that impact creates new Thayans. The 3 nations got on well, which eventually will grow into the stellar concord of free systems. Well, let me know what you think down below.